شوي خمار شوي اريا كروسك. Artenie Shunlan. Artemis to you, as the Amazons say. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Walking the Crossroads. This is the introductory episode where I'll be talking a bit about myself. This is your host, Padre Gossi, as my pseudonym is. And just as a quick explanation, I am the writer and creator behind the Oak Cross Metaverse, a hodgepodge of work that has been going on for well over 10 years. Effectively, since I am such a hardcore role player, I recently decided I was no longer going to be running online communities except everything dedicated to what I've been doing for the past years or so. So now I'm going to be discussing a bit about myself. Padre Gossi is the Gaelic shortening of the full Gaelic name Padraig Tomas Mac Ian O'Callaghan, which is my Gaelicized name. My real name is Patrick, and I prefer Padraig mostly because I decided to go full-on Celtic with the Irish name that I have as is. That being said, my influences for writing go from everything from Tolkien to Ursula Le Guin, including the writers behind The Expanse, and also, of course, George R.R. Martin and Robert Jordan, and a few other authors that are not coming to mind. I would say that my top authors, as I'm going to be discussing influences here for just a few short moments, are going to be Ursula Le Guin and very likely Tolkien. I'm deciding Tolkien for the reason of his ability to build something, to create worlds with not only languages, but with history that makes sense to what happens. Ursula Le Guin mostly for her ability to attack and deconstruct tropes, which at this time and age are a bit harsh for what really needs to be done. What I'm talking about is often when you have evil people in some areas, they are often shown as dark-skinned or the dark-skinned other. In the Ursula Le Guin novels, Earthsea, the good people are the tanned people of the archipelago. And the other people, the people who bring the alien religion and raid other people, are light-skinned people who wield bronze, or more like, you know, what we often see when we see the typical fantasy being attacked by the peoples of the Far East. So much of my work will deal with deconstruction and attacking tropes which have for the last several years become prominent in the mainstream media, and I do this for the main reason of just simply being creative. I like to see things different. I like to try things different. I also like to do things simply for the fact of doing them. So there is no political format for this. There is nothing more than me just trying to be interesting and trying to do something new. Anyway, let's take a step back and discuss a bit about what I am working on. That is Oak Cross, which is effectively a metaverse of 9 worlds. And when I say the 9 worlds, I literally mean the 9 worlds. I'm talking about the 9 worlds of ancient Norse mythology, except this is a bit of a new take. And I have to say that the big influences really came from when I was watching, sadly yes, Thor 2, The Dark World, and you see the 9 worlds lining up. This idea of 9 realities linked together was something that I wanted to run with, and after I ran my Altair campaign on the online game called Altair, which was a play-by-post game with my friend Zin, aka Jordan Varjassi, I have decided to do something a lot more with it. So I combined several universes I've been working on, created a universal rule set, such as how magic works, and a few other things. And I have effectively linked all my novels into a metaverse, which, if anyone is curious, if you have any knowledge of Brandon Sanderson, his Cosmere is definitely an inspiration here. All the books in the Oak Cross metaverse will have some linkage, even if they are fleeting reminders of the lands of Altair, which we will discuss in just a moment. Everything else is related to Altair in some form, or even just linked back. So, because we're mentioning Altair, let's talk a bit about what is Altair. Altair comes from the Gaelic word Altar. The original word in Eldred tongue, being the language of Altair itself, is Altair, and that literally means the land of legend to some degree. The direct translation is not land of legend, but it does mean the other world. In most mythological contexts, we have this land where magic and legend comes from, and in this case, that is Altair. In the lands of Altair, the primordial creatures known as Lord Fire and Lady Ice constructed the world, and then Child Fate brought about the time of the ages. So everything that is remotely magical or mythical is related to this world known as Altair. Now, I'll eventually discuss more about the primordials, including the one that has started to cause a lot of problems, that being Maker, now known as Abyss. But I'll just discuss how they're all linked. The first child of the two main primordials, Lord Fire and Lady Ice, is the World Tree, or as we call her, Krenya Thane, the Lord Therin, the lady or the tree of the world. Now, the World Tree grew outward and linked 9 major universes. These are linked via her roots, or the Frena, the roots of the World Tree. These Frane allowed individuals descended from the primordials, these being the gods of the immortals, and before them the Titans, and after the immortals, the Fae, to travel the various creations and universes that were connected by the World Tree. Altair itself then underwent a gigantic war known as the Giants' War, and these connections were broken, rendering the current status in what we see. The two major worlds that we will see connected in stories to Altair are going to be the land of Agaira, literally Elder Tongue for the broken place, and then Athelon, a lost colony set in a land of the stars. This is also the setting for Tyr Shah Serana, the land of the stars. And also, the name Athelon, by the way, means the fruited or the land of apples. It named so because it was a place where they effectively sent political dissidents. So, let's begin a little bit more about Altair. Altair is a mystical land with many different races. It is currently ruled by the different races known as the Fae. The prime among these being the High Folk, which are the descendants of peoples that once dwelt in these 4 great cities that were built in a grand empire with the World Tree at its center, ruled by High King Oberon and High Lady Titania. Let me correct myself, High Queen Titania, they were equals. In fact, Titania is a primordial. Her name is, in fact, Child Fate. Let's begin with further. After the Giants' War, where High King Oberon was overthrown by the children of Abyss and a titan by the name of Tiamat, the gods that ruled that land were cast across the world in kind of an apocalyptic setting. So various Fae, the children of the gods, the children of the immortals, the Fae, created their own kingdoms. These include the lands of the High Folk, which were the peoples directly of the great cities. These include the Ashrid Empire, the duchies of Villagifa, the High Kingdom of Kells, and other lands. And then you also have the descendants of other gods, which are the Elysians, these kind of feline-like people. Then you have the cursed races, the Satkai set, such as the Kavali, the Dverg, and a few others. The entirety of Altair is meant to mirror the mythologies of our world. This includes anything from Polynesian to even bits and pieces from the peoples of New Guinea and the Amerindian peoples of North America and South America. So, when we constructed all of this, I sat down and spent a while reading not only just mythology, but on the ethnicity of various peoples and understanding their language and culture. This is something you're going to see a lot in my works, which is not only attacking the idea of mythology, but bringing out the understanding of how culture, race, religion, even sexual orientation and gender identity and expression play into how a character thinks. This is something that I do, and this is something I do specifically because I'm an anthropologist and I am a linguist. I like to understand who people are. So now that we have kind of an overview of what Altair is, I'm going to take a step back and we're going to talk about Agaira. I'm going to talk about Agaira specifically because come the end of this week, that being the end of February, I'm going to be releasing the prologue and the first chapter of the very first Nyla Clarkson series, a book which is called Walk Between Shadows. Now, Walk Between Shadows introduces Nyla Clarkson, a character who I've been working on for the past year or so. She sat in my head and she's been wanting me to tell a story. She is reflective of my own life. Now, Agaira is a urban fantasy novels world, which will include many different novels, specifically the Nyla Clarkson novels, and also novels influenced by my grandparents, because my grandfather on my father's side fought in World War II, and my mother's father was effectively, I would say, he was an epic hero. He was a man who grew up with tuberculosis, had to leave high school for a sanitarium, and then actually run off the coast of Washington State, where I live. So I took all the stories that I grew up with from my parents and the rest of my family, and I've constructed a gyra from those influences. The very first story will introduce this land of the Fae, again related to the Fae of Altair, who were trapped in our world and ended up living in a land of splintered magic. So we're going to see how changelings, which is what Nyla is, she's part Fae, part human, how she manages this world, and also how she deals with being half-blooded, also being Native American. Her family is Native American. She's a descendant of a specific tribe, which is influenced by the Tualaip and the Puyallup. She's from the Squalalp Nation down in Pierce County. Now, these are fictional. I did this because I didn't want to appropriate the name of an existing Native American tribe. If anyone's curious, just look at Twilight. That's exactly what happens. So, all of the groups in this, to some degree, if they are related to a real-life nation, such as the Lummi, I live across from a Native tribe, they will have a kind of related group in the Nella Clarkson novels with their own culture. This way, we get a taste of what it means to be Salish, the local native peoples, but also to understand that we're not, as a writer, I am not trying to gain any popularity from their culture or try to make up something about them. These are independent stories influenced by the people I grew up with, not defined by them. So the Nyla Clarkson novels will, in many cases, deal with elements of not only racial identity, but also species identity. Let's face it, Fae aren't human. They never will be human. They think differently than us, and even though they share similar emotions and thoughts, their biology prevents them from effectively thinking like humans or coming to really understand us. This dichotomy will be one of the major aspects of who Nyla is. So, the Aguirre novels effectively will be about a mixture of horror, humor, attacking things such as trans identity, non-binary binary gender identity, and also effectively dealing with cross-cultural individuals. Nyla's family is multicultural. They're Anglo-Saxon, Irish, Native American, Japanese, and also throwing in a few other things there. So it's really going to be about how to deal with a modern American family in a context that maybe doesn't always come to what everybody looks into naturally. So, to note, Aguirre does in Elder Tongue, and Elder Tongue being one of many languages in Altair, it means the broken place. And the Fae call it the broken place because they're trapped there. Their frame, the way back to Altair, cracked, so it has fractured magic there. And we learn more about this in the novel itself, Walk Between Shadows. Alright, so now we've covered a bit about Aguirre. Let's discuss specifically Land in the Stars. But actually, instead of jumping straight into Land in the Stars, which is probably one of the biggest of the various works I'm working on, I'm going to discuss a bit about the Amazons. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, back in 2010, I started writing a novel called Arrowchild. And I will admit, I got this idea specifically from being on a binge watching Xena. This is when Netflix was still keeping a lot of shows on it before they started taking everything off. And I don't know if everyone remembers that. So I started watching a lot of Xena. I started reading up a lot about the Amazons. And I got this idea, why don't I tell a story about Amazons, modern Amazons, real Amazons, not just, you know, someone's kinky leather-clad bikini girl fetish, some actual people. And it didn't help that I fell asleep to some lecture that I found from Netflix about the Exodus, about the Jewish diaspora. So that, plus a few other things, including a healthy reading on the Kurds, I will eventually explain this, but I'll just say this. I did a report on the Kurds. They're one of the groups out there I seriously respect when it comes to a group of people fighting for independence in a land that really doesn't treat them well in a lot of ways. If anyone's curious, they're the people who live in Kurdistan and Iraq, parts of the Kobane, also the Sinjar region. They're very unique people with a very unique idea. And it was this this identity of a group that I've studied for years, and also other groups such as the Irish Gaels in Ireland, the Welsh, the Basques, the Catalans, local Native American tribes that really wanted me to attack something that was very difficult for me, that being specifically a storyline that is not fantastical, a storyline that is actually grounded severely in reality. The only mythical thing ever about the Amazon novels is specifically their kind of dreams of these totem spirits and this goddess Artemis, which we'll eventually get to. So the novels themselves will deal with two main storylines in the first trilogy: the foundation and the creation of the old Amazonia, or Amazones Donri in the Amazon language, and the modern retaking of the land of Amazonia, and also this very shadowy group that seems to be intent upon preventing it. So the first book is called Arrow Child, and it refers to kind of a prophetic individual, which will be explained eventually. Arrow children don't need to necessarily be prophets in the old sense. They don't have to be oracles. They can just be people that bring about great social change or influence new ideas among the Amazon peoples. But the one thing I wanted to do here, just like how I've created a language for the Fae in my works for Land in the Stars, Altair, and other places, Gyra, I created an Amazon language. The Amazon language itself is called Amazo, or Anyajo. There is no M. So when they don't say Amazon, they say Anyajon. And I'll discuss about this more in future podcast entries. But right now, all I can say is this. They are female dominated. They have a very different view on gender than most modern societies do. They have a lot of ways reverse typical gender tropes, but there's a different way on how they see things. We're not talking about the typical, manly women rule everything. It's not like that. It's not that. The way how effectively Amazon see things is this. Both genders go to war. And I'm saying this because we're talking about a typical Indo-European group, so I started with the typical binary here. Both genders go to war. Women tend to be more spiritual. They tend to be shamans. They tend to be leaders. Leadership is almost exclusively for the feminine gender. And this is done because the Amazons believe women are stronger. They're stronger because they can endure more pain, specific to childbirth. They give birth to children. They raise children. Therefore, because they are the leaders of the household, they should rule the nation. Men on the other side take on more of a supporting role. They back their women. They do not tell them what to do. It's actually more modern for men to be more dominant in their society, but this is not very typical. Men tend to be very supportive. They tend to be more laid back. The women tend to be more harsh and hot-headed. This is just how Amazons think. This is how they are different. There is also a difference in the various clans. They call these clans the genon. It's derived from the Greek word genos, which means tribe. There are different Amazon clans, and there are different Amazon bloodlines which relate to things, but there's an entire culture, an entire language, an entire history, dating up to 10,000 years, and including a holy book I've written, part of a holy book I've written, which is called the Codex. The very first novel is called Arrow Child, and once I eventually get a editor for it, I hope to see it out there. It's a fantastic mixture of thriller and mystery. Anyway, so let's sit down and finally discuss the very, very lengthy work that I've been going on for the next year or so. And this is The Land in the Stars, Tair Shah Seirana, or Athelon. Land in the Stars is a space opera setting that I have effectively sat on for probably about 5 years. It is a mixture of 4 or 5 different universes dating back to my time when I was a role player on Gaia Online, and just various ideas. I would say, though, the biggest influences for this are going to be Babylon 5, a manga series known as 5 Star Stories, and a lot of other things. It's very influenced by anime, a lot of typical sci-fi tropes, space romance. If anyone here has read the I'm just going to be they're misogynistic, but they're fun to read, the Barsoom novels, or the novels of Pellucidar, there is definitely an influence there for how things work. But this is the setting I've been working on to a point of where I have 5 races. There are 5 separate star systems. There are mecha. There are houses. If anyone would like a good comparison, this is not really Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones deals specifically with not the way how it's presented in the show, but more on how the books. Think Song of Ice and Fire with a healthy amount of Dune. So if you are a fan of Dune, the level of ethnic, political, religious, various clashes that just occur there. But it also sort of a Lord of the Rings influence in the fact of the history, the epicness of the history, the various battles, the magics, the techno-magics that exist here. It is made specifically as sort of this hot mess of influences. But I'll say this. If you like mecha, if you like, I would say, fantastical sci-fi, this is soft sci-fi, soft science, so things are meant to be fantastical and kind of out of whack. There are limits, though. But if you like things in the matter of I would say thematic. If you like thematic values of epic stories, of harrowing romance, of powerful leaders, of various different identities, Land of the Stars is something I've been building specifically for that. In fact, the character I play and I've designed specifically for this, his name is Faoud, and he is I'm going to say he is a gender fluid villain. And I'm saying he's a villain not because he's gender fluid, but because of how he thinks. Here, and I'm going to say he at one point, she at one point, they at another point. Faoud is Faoud. You can only understand Faoud by seeing this individual in place, but he or she, and I'm switching here because there is no appropriate pronoun for this situation, but effectively a bit like Nyla, I have a thing right now for writing genderqueer characters because it deals with my own identity, but Faoud switches bodies. This is like Ghost in the Shell in a way. He switches bodies to suit his current format and how he feels at the moment. It is a true cyberpunk technological take on what it means to change your gender identity. This is the kind of thing you can see in the Land of the Stars. There's also a lot of brutality in how things work. There's an entire race known as the Gwagara, the Hollow Ones, who effectively steal people's lives to reproduce. There are the undead techno-zombies known as the Arashi, who take the bodies of the dead, enhance them with cybernetic prosthetics, and bring them back to life using a highly addictive substance known only as the Black Ichor. There are the Soul Given, those given souls, the Enarodir, the sort of synthetic. They're a bit like the Skin Jobs, the human Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. They are slaves. They are also the bonded partners to those who pilot the mechs. Then there are, let's see, the Pharaoh, which are the primary race, such as Fa'u. They're the ones who rule everything. And then you finally have the Helagav, the corrupted, a race derived from the Pharaoh. All races derived from the Pharaoh. Derived from, effectively, a form of star leprosy. Imagine if you had a horrible disease and then someone tries to cure it using nanite technology, and the nanites mutate and start turning people into living elementals. This is the Land in the Stars. There is only one way to describe it. Fantastical, epic, mythical space opera. A game which will be eventually designed. It's going to become a play-by-post series and hopefully a setting for short stories and future novels. So if this is something you're interested in, feel free to contact me. So, we have discussed the basis of the Crossroads and all of the various worlds in here. Not to mention another world known as Loak Ajala, which is something I will eventually reveal. A sort of floating world with flying a golden age of sail ships set in a sort of British Raj with enslaved magical beings. That is one I will eventually work on. So, this has been a fantastic yet sort of short episode discussing things a lot more that I expected to take a bit longer, but I feel like this is a good point in which we can leave off of. I understand that the mishmash was kind of confusing, and thank you for everyone that has listened. If you have anything to say, leave it down in the comments.